All right, greetings everybody. Welcome to Relentless, episode 126. Today we're going to be joined by Nobody's Take. I'm looking forward to this one. I'll see you all in a jiffy. All right, greetings everybody. Like I said, welcome to episode 126 of Relentless. Today we're going to be speaking to Nobody's Take, a wonderful Australian. Before I bring on Nobody, we're going to watch the most recent video from Nobody on X, and this is about one of our most favourite people, Julian Mann-Grant, the unelected E-Commissioner. Let's have a little bit of a look at this.
Can't has just discovered a terrifying new weapon used by domestic abusers, the Tesla app. Speaking in front of a refrigerator, she spoke of how a car app can be used to track your non-binary ex down who's been paying less for insurance. She's offered chops here, clutching at flimsy paper straws to take down her mate Elon. Yesterday, Tel Afibasek went on Sky News, eyes wide like a psychopath, mouth like a Gen Z stare, warning that connected cars are trapping women and weaponizing technology. $7,000 for things that didn't happen. Translation: Elon still won't censor X the way they want, so now they're coming for his car. The solution? More government oversight of your car, of course. Because nothing says protecting victims like giving bureaucrats a live feed of your Sunday drive to Coles. The only people who can afford an EV are public servants anyway, so they're doing themselves a disservice. Tesla already lets you revoke access in 2 taps and even has a domestic violence removal protocol. But facts don't get you headlines or revenge on a person who called you, rightly so, a censor. What's next? Fridge cameras are coercive control because the person standing behind her there can't resist Tim Tams? So anyway, we've got a ban on social media next week. The week after that, men will probably be banned from driving. Thanks, Karen.
So there we go, everybody. That's Nobody's Take, most recent video. Nobody covers a lot of issues, politically, driven, I guess, with videos, culture, social issues, often, as you've just seen, with a satirical and spicy edge. It's my great pleasure to welcome Nobody to the stage. Hello, how are you?
G'day, I'm very good today. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining me. I must say I did enjoy that latest video of yours. It's always good to have a little bit of a giggle sometimes, even though these particularly unelected bureaucrats are impinging on our lives far too much for anybody's good. Before we get on talking about a whole array of issues, I know my audience will be wondering, what were you doing during the COVID war?
So during the COVID war, I was doing a satirical magazine called Bushlit Telegraph. So as you can probably guess, Bushlit was referencing bullshit. And it was a satirical news, just day by day articles, because so much was happening. And I was just thinking, I'm going to have to take the piss out of that, because that's what I'm good at. So I just did all these Substack articles. They're not there anymore because they got suspended, but it was just something to ease the trauma of this entire psychological operation on our on our minds. So I enjoyed doing that. And I also started a nostalgia project called Restore Australia. I'm not sure if you've ever come across that TikTok account. It's the
No.
biggest nostalgia account in Australia, 126,000 followers. It's about 3,000 videos. You know, I had plenty of time during COVID, of course. So I posted all this Australian nostalgia, which I think, you know, got us to this point perhaps of you know, the divide we see today with nationalism rising, because, you know, 126,000 Australians follow that account. So yeah, that was my COVID projects, I guess. I had some good fun.
Did you? I'm not on TikTok, so I don't see anything over there, obviously. But did you put your face on camera at that time, or if not, what possessed you to start putting your face on camera?
No, that was partly my voice only. Look, I guess we're in a time when things are getting so bad that, you know, as you say, courage is the cure. And we see a lot of anon accounts online these days just spewing hate. And, you know, I've experienced that too with certain videos I've put out, are just anon accounts with showing no face, abusing me, calling me everything under the sun, whether it be the left or the far right doing that. And I've also, you know, earlier in the year, been through a mental health breakdown as well. I don't know if it was just that whole COVID thing just pushed me to the edge, but I had to move 8 times during COVID because of stupid things that happened. So, you know, I've been through a lot, and, you know, at my financial end point earlier in the year. Plus, it was a solar maximum. I don't know if you believe in that affecting people, but it's a solar maximum as well. So, you know, that really affects me. And
Yep.
yeah, I went through a period there where, you know, I was in hospital a couple of times because I was just so exhausted and spent. So yeah, after that, I decided, well, this is a good time to get abused online. So, you know, that's just what I need. So I'll put my face on the camera. But look, earlier in the year, I spent a lot of time sort of infiltrating the left to try and understand what they were about. So I guess that the first part of my account was, you know, seeing how the left works. And then I shifted to the right to see how the far right worked. And now I have a good understanding of both sides. Plus, I have a good understanding of the history of Australia from the nostalgia project that I did during COVID, that I can now put all this together and come up with videos where I can take the piss out of, you know, everything, but also get a message across. So yeah, that's my story of this, putting my face on the camera.
Yeah, because I think I mean you just referenced the faceless accounts and the no-name accounts and all those sorts of things, and, you know, I guess you'd say the typical keyboard warriors that, you know, we affectionately refer to these people living in their mother's basements. But, you know, it does take something within every person who actually does front up and put their face on camera, because, you know, as much as it seems like, oh, you know, here's just another person, you know, lobbing up in front of a camera and you know, doing some research or giving their opinion, and just disregarding that. I don't think people really get that it does kind of put you in a compromised position, particularly for your personal life and your family and all those sorts of things. So I really do appreciate what you said there. That's for sure. Infiltrating the left, holy moly! I don't think I'd have the patience. How did you cope with that?
So I went to a few of their protests, actually, particularly ones centered around the deaths in custody. And, you know, I dressed all in black. I bought an Aboriginal armband just to fit in. And look, it's very, very strange being there. I had multiple people come up to me asking me if I knew what the protest was about. You know, those yellow vest kind of people you see blocking cameras and stuff of journalists that go into their protests. Yeah, that kind of people coming up to me on all different occasions just to vet me. But the right don't do that, which is, I think, probably, well, I guess there's just more high trust on the right than the left. The left are a very low trust. They don't even trust their own to give opinions, so they censor each other. And I found that posting stuff that dug at the right or dug at anyone, really, they just came out with the most vitriol hate on the left. They're just full of hate and resentment and not disgust. This disgust is more of a right kind of trait, but it's just this disconnected hate of the world that's totally propagandized from what they consume. It's an imposed morality. It's not intrinsic, whereas the right is more natural, I think, despite going too far sometimes. But that's what I found.
Should I leave the orange and yellow vested jokes until the latter part of the show? I mean, I think somebody was accosted over the weekend by someone in a fluoro vest. But anyway, we'll talk about maybe we won't talk about that. So, as I said at the beginning of the show, your videos do cover Australian politics and culture and social issues and all those sorts of things. And just hearing now your on the ground research that you've done with both sides, if you like. And I know people in the audience are going to say, oh, there is no left and right. It's, it's all manipulated and all these sorts of things. But the fact of the matter is, whether you like it or not, those two factions do exist at the bare minimum, I would say.
Yeah, well, different people are drawn to either side for different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, the right are drawn by revenge. They like the optics of revenge, whereas the left are more so, I'm going to deculture myself. I'm going to denaturalize myself into this flattened, no point of difference, so I can belong in a group that doesn't really stand for anything but this imposed morality. It's just completely unnatural on the left. That's what I found.
Well, our insurance companies apparently will give you a discount. But anyway.
Yeah, I made a joke about that in today's video.
Yeah. Well, we started off with your video, of course, of Julian Munn-Grant there, and she was talking, well, the video you were referencing there was from the 1st of December 2025 when she was introduced by Plibersek and came out in front of the corporate media cameras and talked about technology facilitating abuse. So in case anybody hasn't seen it, I would like to play it for everybody. I'm just going to add it to the stage. Enjoy this, everybody. Here's Julian Munn-Grant.
Thank you, Minister, so much for your leadership. We know that technology can be used as both a tool and a weapon. We want it to be a lifeline for women. But throughout the course of eSafety's 10 years, we've been consistently training frontline workers because we know that technology-facilitated coercive control is almost ubiquitous in family, domestic, and sexual violence situations. So, with the generosity of DSS, we have stood up the world's first national technology-facilitated abuse service. We've had 20,000 frontline workers utilize our self-help hub, where we have technology audits and updates beyond the cat feeders and the refrigerators. A perpetrator can use a line bike. And today we're talking about smart cars because they are essentially computers on wheels today, and we don't want them to become weapons on wheels. By 2031, 90% of all cars sold in Australia will have telematics systems. They already have GPS. You can remotely control or lock or start the car. You can prevent an EV, for instance, from being charged. And these are the types of things we're hearing from domestic frontline workers are happening to Australian women today. So we're here. We've worked with about 400 domestic frontline workers for really complex cases. Why a woman or her children are being gaslit, cannot figure out why her ex-partner knows where she is. And we've pretty much seen everything under the sun, including children used as pawns in the surveillance of their own custodial parent. And this can happen through the gifting of iPads or iPhones with spyware on them, a new gaming system with a camera that shows who the mother might have as a guest in her home. So again, we want technology to be a tool and a lifeline, not as a vector of abuse. And so we continue to provide service to the broader public. And today we put out an online safety advisory specifically around smart cars. We've done a number of these around coercive control and changing attitudes of young men around romantic relationships, where they think that they should be able to have the passwords of their partners. They should be able to expect immediate responses to phone calls and texts. And we need to change these attitudes and make sure that we're keeping people safe with the technology that we use every day. Thank you.
Oh, that was painful to listen to again. Weapons on wheels, nobody. I mean, weapons on wheels.
Yeah, that I wrote down that word. Yeah.
The
boomers will be going crazy.
No, you go. Sorry. Yep.
The boomers will be going crazy. You know, they don't like the e-bikes. So weapons on wheels, they'll be cheering at that one. But yeah, just the use of the word weapon. You know, you see all this kind of psychological warfare language these days, even with the weather. You know, a rain bomb event is coming, and this is just the same kind of thing. It's you know, basically, you know, MK-ing the public to be traumatized by fake stories or overblown stories, and to live in fear. And then they implement their safety crap. And it made me think that e-safety commissioner, and she's talking about all these other kinds of electronics as well in the future. She's actually the electronic safety commissioner, not just online safety. Yeah. I don't know what she's said so many different things in that. I don't know where to start.
I mean, I've been on my morning shows, Rise, I've done a few episodes over the past 12 months about them using gendered violence. So mostly it's, you know, men are bad, you know, this toxic masculinity, you know, gendered violence being used as one of the suite of tools that they've devised to censor people online and to also demonize Australian men. You know, and here we have, I mean, people would have seen the numerous videos of our current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. I mean, him talking about healthy relationships and, you know, in turn our e-safety commissioner, it's ridiculous. I mean, we've got Albo in there in Parliament saying smash it. Do we remember during the election campaign he pushed away that Chinese lady or Asian lady that wanted to pushed her away,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's really healthy relationships, isn't it? No.
Yeah, this idea of toxic masculinity, right? In doing this, they actually force men to start listening to people like Andrew Tate or something like that, because they're totally excluding men by saying that term. So no man is going to listen to someone saying that they're toxic, right? So you're totally excluding them from the discourse, from the public sphere, everything like that. And who do they have left to turn to? Well, connections in real life aren't too good these days. So you turn to online things. And the problem I have down the track is that if they remove all this online stuff, which they want to do with digital duty of care and things like that, where are men going to have to turn to? Like the despair of men without any online material that's in any way pro-masculine. Well, I just see that filtering into drug problems, violence problems out there, rather than men having, you know, even a fraction of place to turn to online.
Well, I still happen to have here in my media assets a news article from quite a long time ago now in the worst Australian kitty litter newspaper. And this was about, you know, boys will be cross out boys, decent men, massive funding injection for school programming programming, targeting toxic masculinity. I mean, they're inserting all of this, not only, I mean, this is part of the woke agenda essentially as well. All of this nonsense into our schools. So not only do, men have nowhere to go, our children are being programmed.
Yeah, but it just fails every time, because you go outside and you realize, well, okay, we're living in a more and more less trustful society every day. So all this stuff that they've done for the last 10, 15, 20 years or whatever in this century is having the opposite effect when you go outside.
Mhm.
And again, teaching this stuff in schools, the boys, they're not listening. I don't see it, because when you go outside, they're all being more rabid than ever. One of them rode past on their bike the other day and shouted the N-word at me, just like describing dark Americans or whatever. Just, they have no fucks given. This generation. So as I said before, all this programming, as you say, has the opposite effect, particularly on boys going through puberty. And I don't know what their end goal is, to remove boys going into puberty at all. You have so much endocrine disruptors these days. I don't know if you've ever read anything on that, removing testosterone and stuff like that. You see that Monster drink being pushed in the far right online these days, a white Monster. Now, energy drinks actually drain your energy quickly, right? And then after your energy is drained, adrenaline and cortisol kick in. And that starts a cycle of anxiety and depression, right? Because you're constantly draining, and like a battery, draining quickly and then charging all the time. You lose the energy over time from the battery. So just little things like that, I think, just all combine to a future where I don't know what's going to happen to men. It's just going to be this slop and violence and slop. I don't see anything in between. They call for a decent man in that article, but what's a decent man? They push Abby Chatfield's boyfriend, for example, and he's an absolute mess. He's a disgrace to humanity, man. Yep. So what is they don't present an idea of a good man? Maybe a centrist politician? Well, no one cares about the centre in politics anymore. 34% of people vote Labor. No one likes Liberal anymore, and they're going to the extremes. People want what's the word? Role models that are, I guess, violent in nature. Violent in words and. But I think all this stuff is pushing them towards that.
It's all this sort of stuff stinks of ideological subversion to me. And, we can literally see it now when we go outside and just observe people. If you sit in a cafe for 10 minutes and people watch, that's where my thoughts tend to go. We've got to talk about digital ID before we move on to politics, because, of course, we've got the under 16-year-old social media ban coming in to protect the children from harmful content online, and let's not forget Miss Julie reminding us that smart devices can be weaponized and all these sorts of things. What are your thoughts about the ban? Because, obviously the sky's not going to fall in. People have differing opinions about it. It's not going to be able to be rolled out in full force. We just don't have the technology, all these sorts of things. Where are you with this new ban?
Look, I've used European apps that do the face scan and stuff like that, and it does work, but it doesn't work very well. For example, I put my real age right into it, and then it says, no, I'm not that age because I look younger. And it says, I have to change my age in it to be in the 22 to 28 bracket, and then it approves me. I'm like, well, no, about 10 years older than that. So this is the kind of technology that will be getting used to do these things. Now, the problem I see with it is I think it's deliberately getting set up to fail. And the reason I say that is because next year, midway through next year, they're allowing private enterprise to come onto the MyGov platform. that was already planned in the 2024 Act, right? So it's sort of a problem, reaction, solution kind of scenario where they're creating the problem with this, oh, no, it's not going to work. And, you'll see the media just go for it over the next 6 months, picking at it and how it doesn't work and how kids are still seeing Andrew Tate videos online or something, heaven forbid. And it will end up being digital ID presented as the solution to the problem, where Facebook, X, all those platforms are now allowed onto the digital ID MyGov platform, where your government verified identity is the only way to get onto these platforms. And of course, that links it in back rooms to who you are, not necessarily by name, but by your digital token. So, they know all your devices and they know everything you're saying. And law enforcement will be allowed to ask the government to reveal the identity of that person, to come knocking at your door for a meme. I think that's the end point of it. And a lot of people I don't think understand that, because they don't understand. And I've been trying to break this down in my videos. My digital ID videos are probably the most popular. That even gets the left coming onto the digital ID issue is across all political realms. It's not just the right. But the funny thing is, just last week, all my digital ID videos got this warning on them on TikTok, right, saying ineligible for recommendation. And I had to take a misinformation course to unlock my account. And that was just last week. So now my most popular videos telling people about digital ID, I have about 10 that are at length in explaining it, are now pretty much banned from the For You algorithm, because they don't want people knowing. And I'm not saying anything outrageous. I'm literally explaining the act.
Well, I think that says more about the platforms. I know through FOIs that we've had detailing the requests from the e-safety commissioner's office to various platforms, namely Facebook, Instagram, and X. So that's Meta and X. When she sent communications to those platforms to remove videos, Meta never argue back. They're always the first to remove or restrict those videos. X, and I've seen it through FOIs, X pushes back. Anybody that watches me knows that I'm not a huge X supporter, because it's actually not a free speech platform. It's better than the other ones. But, I have to say that Meta never pushes back and X does. So I'm assuming TikTok never pushes back.
Well, if you look where TikTok's office is in Sydney, it's in Barangaroo, and it's in this shiny new building, and you can imagine the kind of people that work there from inner city Sydney. So they're the kind of people that will go, oh, this lovely lady, Julie Imam Kant, is sending me this letter to tell Nobody's Take that all his videos that get 500,000 views on digital ID, just take them off the algorithm. Yeah. Nobody needs to know about this. Oh yeah, that's really good. But it doesn't. I don't know why they do that, because it doesn't benefit their platform. If they restrict speech too much on their platform, people are going to go elsewhere. And you might say they go to X, but I don't think X is a very good platform either, because it silos everybody into particular places, and you never see sort of outside content. And the algorithm that changed recently, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, it's just garbage now. It's sort of becoming like the Meta platform, where it pushes older content that's more popular rather than new content that spreads the latest news. And I don't like that at all, because I don't scroll Instagram, because it gives me posts from 12 weeks ago. That's nothing. I can't work like that. I need to know what's happening right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Meta. Do you want me to talk about Meta?
Yes,
yeah,
please.
So Meta, funnily enough, gets a lot of the government contracts with certain things. And, I think Meta, Microsoft, and all those kinds of companies are the ones that work best with the government. So they're the first to restrict certain things online. I think In Australia, Facebook is still very popular. I don't know why. I absolutely hate it. I'm not on there in terms of nobody's take. I do have a page, but I don't post. It's just so hard to post. But I do have Instagram, which picks up certain videos but discards others, whatever the government thinks is good or bad. Whereas TikTok actually ramps up the right posts, and I don't know how much longer there is left for that. So I definitely agree with you in terms of Meta. They're definitely working with the government to control speech in this country.
Well, and along with the under 16-year-old social media ban, something which I think, obviously on purpose, my conspiracy allegedly, towards the latter part of December, Google is going to be requiring people to use age assurance technology if they want to use Google in a logged in state, which means they remove the blur or the filtered search features or lack thereof, if you like. What do you think? Because I've been thinking about it, because as you just said, I want to know what the latest issues are right now, and I use all sorts of different ways to do that. And I do use Google to search stuff. What do you think the future is for Australians, and not just people like yourself and me who want to see what's happening right now for our work, but the future for Australians to be able to access uncensored news and information? Because if people choose not to log into Google, you're going to be receiving a censored or much more censored search result.
Okay, so we'll put it this way. Think of how the vaccine worked, right? They wanted to get as many people as possible to take it. Now, in Australia, Australia is weird because it's a market that uses all the same things. iPhone, Facebook, they're very centered on certain platforms, whereas other countries have much more of a diaspora across all platforms. So the government in Australia goes for the easy platforms, and they leave places like Rumble and that to the side. So when I'm talking about the vaccine, they want to get 95% of the population on board. So they'll go for Google, because I don't use Google anymore because I think it's become rubbish in the last year. I can't find anything when I go searching on there. I pretty much just use it for searching businesses now. That's about it. I use Yandex, which is getting there in terms of AI slop kind of search results, but it still gives me a much broader range of results like Google would have in the 2000s. So again, those of us in the 5% that resist will have places to go, and the government won't really care, because they must leave those open, because in Australia they like to use that 5% in the media to say, oh, hey, don't do what these bad guys are doing. But they must leave the platform open in order to have that. Yeah, just like they allowed that New South Wales Parliament protest without any police presence there, because they like to use that for the media and to change laws. So it's the exact same thing. They like the extremes as long as they can control them in terms of demonstration, I guess. Which I guess sort of got out of hand during COVID, but I think they've learned from that, because as far as I'm concerned, that was just one big psychological experiment for them to understand how people work in a digital age. And, the intellectuals are doing the work behind the scenes now to break down everything that happened during that with their, AI data centers feeding in the data and pushing out studies and all stuff like that. And I think the future is really stuffed for us, to be honest. People aren't going to push back against this digital ID in any way enough, particularly in Australia at least, because everyone's so compliant, as we saw during COVID. Apart from the real fringes that really do stand up and make a ruckus, but it's not enough. And it's easy for the media, because all the media in this country is the same. Unlike other countries, we don't really have any independent mainstream media that even hints at any dissent from what the government says. Maybe Sky News After Dark, but that audience is about 20,000 people. So I get more audience than that.
Exactly. Yeah, it just concerns me that, our youth and our small humans, you know, if they live in households with people like me and you and people in the audience, you know, they are going to hear conversations and be exposed to information that isn't mainstream, which is, I would say, much closer to the truth of what's going on, not only in Australia, but around the world. So, you know, my concern is that with, you know, what we've just talked about with Google, with the social media platforms, with young people being locked out, all these sorts of things, you know, they're not only censoring information, but they're setting the stage to be able to create a further narrative in the future for our young people, just like in 1984, where they, you know, with Newspeak, where they remove words from the language and all these sorts of things. So these concepts in our brain don't exist and all
I
these
think we're
sorts of
already
things.
there,
So,
but yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. So I just worry about the young people, and you know that more than ever, I certainly feel like more than ever, it's important that we talk. You know, we used to sit around with our families, you know, and talk about stuff. You know, so I think maybe that
Yeah,
might have
well,
a
a lot of
resurgence.
these youth don't have families. That's the problem. You know, you got
Mm,
50% divorce rate, right? And
yeah.
that's dire. You know, they're just, a lot of them are just out there. I see these days, just there's no control, and that's only increasing, particularly with certain immigration. But my problem with locking them out, right? I make it analogous to this. So you bring a Somalian to Melbourne, right? And they're thrown into this situation where they're at the bottom of the social ladder. You know, they come from a poor, corrupt country, right?
Mhm.
They're thrown to the bottom of this society where we sort of have a social ladder here. They can't climb up it. And what do they resort to? They resort to violence and crime. Now, with the locking 16-year-olds out of social media, I think it might have the same effect when they turn 16, because they'll have 16 years where they're curated by, you know, the curriculum and government schools and Karen parents and not being able to see any information outside the box. That when they hit 16, they'll be presented with all these new worldviews, and that really stuffs with you mentally, particularly during the time of development, right?
Mhm.
And that will cause radicalization more than now, violence and crime, because that's the same as putting the Somalian in Melbourne, as far as I'm concerned. But I think the thing that they genuinely think that they're going to be successful with is curating the content on the internet. And that's where that digital duty of care thing comes in, which I don't think will work. Because if remember back to puberty, both boys and girls, it's a rebellious stage, right? So
Mhm.
whatever the current culture is, it doesn't matter what it is, you will go against it. Well, many of them will, not everyone, but many of them will.
Yep.
Maybe if you're from a good family home, you might not. But if you don't have good parents, which a lot of these people these days don't, it's just instant rebellion to somewhere else. And if they can't have an online outlet, they'll go and do it out on the street. And we're just going to see more and more violence with this taking off. So that's my idea of what it will be like. And I don't think it will be successful either way. You know, maybe they won't be able to curate the internet, but they definitely won't be able to stop the rebellious. And I think that's another puberty blocker thing for changing gender of kids. You know, all these things are attacks on free people. You know.
Mhm. Just thinking about
I could talk
the
about that for
adult.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just thinking about the adult population, you know, with the political situation that Australia finds itself in at the moment. I mean, you know, I'm a strong believer in the uni party, two cheeks of the same arse. I don't think there's any real political party out there that is an answer to any of our problems, you know, for the next election, certainly. Um, we've got my question would be, is the Australian public becoming rebellious? Before you answer that, I just want to play this video from Labor Senator Tim Ayres, and he's talking about the Australian flag, and alluding to it being hateful and all these sorts of things. Let's just hear from Tim, shall we? Here we go.
To be patriotic Australians who wrap themselves in the flag. Real Australians, decent Australians, patriotic Australians shrink from that kind of vileness. I have never seen a comment in this chamber more repulsive, that would repel every decent Australian.
So wrapping yourself in the Australian flag is vile, according to Tim. Where are we politically in your thoughts? And, just think about, as I said, the adult population in Australia. Are we becoming rebellious against the overreach and ridiculousness of our government, just like Mr. Tim there?
Look, certain populations are. Okay, so put it this way. The middle class, right, as they get hollowed out, and I don't see any way back from how this will happen. We're getting a tighter and tighter wealthy class because you can't be socially mobile anymore, right? So wherever you are right now is where you're at. And if you squander your money, then you're going to end up at the bottom. You can't get back up. There's no job that can get you back up to pay $2 million for a house. So as that middle class gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed with more socialism, which means more tax, which means more fines, which means more, just more taking of that money for the middle, which I think is the overarching issue from what the UN are trying to do, redistribute the wealth of the white nationalist people or whatever, the original stealers of everyone's wealth, apparently, whatever. So that middle class will get squeezed either way. They'll get squeezed to the far right or they'll get squeezed to the far left, whichever, appeals to their emotional state of fear and being left out. And there seems to be a 50-50 split on that. I don't really know how that works. And as I explained before, there is a difference between the left and the right and who goes to it. As for the problem of the uni party, this is the real issue of the time. So if we look back to Federation, I don't think they envisaged this kind of thing happening where we have a two-party system that becomes so centrist in their views that they start turning the dial on tiny little things like 20% off HEX, which appeals to a small amount of people that got university degrees, or they don't come out with any visionary policy. They're trying to keep the center by censoring everything else. But at the same time, they're squeezing the middle class, which sends everybody to the extremes. So they've really stuffed it up. Now, the original idea of federation, say the first 10 years of Australia, we had three parties: Free Trade Party, Protectionist Party, Labor Party, and they all kept throwing each other out of government during that time. There was no real long-term 3-year election cycle back then. And over 50, 60 years, they twisted and turned and changed things. And we got proportional voting in the Senate. We got preferential voting in the lower house. These weren't things that we started with. But you can't do that anymore because neither party is going to go for a referendum to change anything that takes away their power. And they're both in cahoots with that. You see them all the time. They're still doing that stupid tennis game when they pump out their stupid TikTok videos saying, Labor is the worst on this issue and Liberal is the worst on this issue. The majority of the population are totally tuned out of that crap now because we see right through it. We see them for the same side of the coin. Pretty much we're just voting now based on who's the least worst leader. And nobody likes Spud the Dud and nobody likes Lame Duck Lay. Until they pick an inspiring leader that's a bit better than Albo, they're not going to get the votes back. We're choosing on a more populist kind of mechanism now. Albo got in specifically because that was, I think, timed at the start of Trump's second term. People didn't know where that was going yet. And it was fun at the time to put shit on Trump. And so majority of people preferenced Labor. Plus, Liberal didn't have a good candidate. But yeah, the uni-party problem is a real serious issue of the time because there is no mechanism for we the people to submit anything that says, okay, we need a referendum on this to split up the uni-party. So how does the uni-party end? It doesn't. It can only end by extinguishing itself with these, polarized parties rising, and we're going to get the same situation as America and the same situation as the UK. If you've seen the latest poll in the UK, Labor goes from 400 and something seats to 6. That's their latest poll. And Reform UK has about the far majority of seats in the latest poll over there. So they're going to get, which I don't think is the solution either. I think they're a controlled party as well that will just invite the same kind of problem that America is having under Trump. It's inviting in private enterprise to control the population. You see that with Palantir and stuff like that. They're doing digital ID by private enterprise over there, right? So it's still the same result, but they're getting it through the private market. And that's what parties like One Nation and Reform, I think, are aligned with. They're aligned with private billionaires that want to impose their control rather than Albo's and the left's idea, which is central government control, CBDC, all these kinds of things, which I think is the worst option, to be honest. But they're still both bad. So where do we go from here? We don't have a party that is even anywhere near as good as Reform in terms of being in the public sphere. One Nation's a joke. Pauline can't string a sentence together that makes any coherent sense on most occasions, as far as I'm concerned. Who else do we have? We have this idea of a WAP party, but where's that? Their leader's in jail.
Yeah. Well, amongst,
one of them.
freedom lovers, Gerard Rennick certainly has retained support, let's put it that way, after he lost his seat. And as far as money and economics and all those sorts of things, I mean, I'm certainly no specialist in those areas, don't get me wrong, but he certainly has much more experience than anybody else I've seen in any sort of place in government when you're talking about those areas. But he's pretty much unknown to the rest of the Australian public, and there's always that kind of charismatic factor.
Yeah,
that,
can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Gerard Rennick is an administrator. He's an accountant. Very boring. Okay, despite knowing a lot of stuff. I try to seek a balance of that. I'm sort of populist and know my stuff. But I'm not the kind of populist probably that would get. Well, I could just go full bore, and possibly go full charismatic populist. But then you have to feed a lot of disinformation, which I don't like doing, just to get people on side. So Gerard Rennick is not a populist. And in this age of extremes, you're just not going to get votes from disaffected younger people. Mm-hmm. I think this kind of idea of peaceful politics dies with the boomers. I don't see any of the other generations drawn to centrist, mediocre politics. You have to be a charismatic populist, and that is his downfall. He would be great as a right-hand man to someone, absolutely, particularly of his economics, because I also have a website, austank.org, austank.org, where I have policy ideas on there. And a lot of my economic policies sort of align with his. Mine go further, but but everything else, I don't think, especially on the immigration issue, he doesn't know how to sell it. His videos are very boring, but that is not to say that he's not a bad person, because he is a good person. Yeah. But he will not break through.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm just wondering, because during the previous federal election, there was many discussions that I was a part of. Obviously, as you just mentioned, on the back of Trump winning his second presidency, excuse me. And then comparing the options that we had at the time in Australia for the federal election, and people talking about we just don't have anybody that has that sort of charismatic wow factor, and all these sorts of things. I just wonder if, and I don't know, I just wonder if the tall poppy syndrome that we seem to have in Australia would make it very difficult for anybody that is actually very charismatic and potentially could be very good at a leadership position. That sort of culture that we have here, and I'm not actually sure that we do, that we have here prevents that from happening, because I just look around and I think, what is going on? There's no serious option here, and I really feel like we cannot vote our way out of tyranny anymore. We just don't have an option.
No, the tyranny just has to extinguish itself eventually by the people just. Yeah, I don't know how. I think about it all the time, and I only get despaired when I think about it. But as for the tall poppy syndrome, look, it's tough to explain, I guess, because it's not happening more and more in extremes. But in the normies out there, it definitely still exists, particularly in white majority areas, which is like I live, where there is a monoculture that exists of very bland and non-intellectual. Anti-intellectualism, I think, has a history in Australia. We have a brain, it's an intellectual desert, right? A lot of our great minds go overseas because because of the tall poppy syndrome, you just can't capture the Australian audience. In the past, they've just wanted someone mediocre that doesn't stand out. But that is changing a little bit, but only on the extremes. But I don't know how big the extremes will get, or how soon that will happen. You still have the boomers that will tear down, and you still have normies in Gen Z that tear me down all the time. If I present myself well, but I get called a FAGET, because I present myself well, So it still exists.
Yeah. I'm just wondering now about, I guess this leads us nicely into talking about liberty lovers in Australia and Australia lovers and the people that want to save our country. And particularly for ex-users, you would have seen over the past months, and in particular the past couple of weeks, some conversations, X Spaces, lots of video, lots of coverage, lots of podcasts, lots of live streaming about the March for Australia rallies and the Put Australia First rallies. And over the weekend, we just had 2 rallies in Sydney and Melbourne for Put Australia First. And of course, directly before those rallies and afterwards, there's been, again, X Spaces, podcasts, lots of conversations. And I just want to pop up on the stage here. This infograph here is from Chris Goverys. So shout out to Chris. I've hijacked it from your X account. And so Chris has been covering, the marches, the X Spaces, and has transcribed the X Spaces podcast, the rally speeches, and he's created this infograph here with the 2 sides of, you can see the MFA on the left, the March for Australia, and the PAF, the Put Australia First, and the description that he gives it is that he's, as I said, transcribed all the words from the speeches from both of the rallies, plus the organisers' Q&A space, and this is an explainer of the 2 groups' vast ideological divide. The reason I put this up on the screen, nobody, is not because, I want to have a shit slinging fest about two different groups of Australia loving people. The question I want to ask is, obviously we are seeing an erosion of Australian culture, if you like, and even with the general public, we can see from the March for Australia rallies that those were very large rallies, and people can have their own discussions about, the information available to people before they rocked up to those rallies, so on and so forth. Go and talk about it somewhere else. But even amongst the general public, not just the MFA and the PFA and the freedom lovers and the liberty lovers, even the general public are seeing this cultural erosion. They're concerned about Australia for a variety of reasons: immigration, the cost of living crisis, all these sorts of things. How do we... what are your thoughts about this kind of ideological divide, as Chris Coveries has put there in his description? What are your thoughts about that? How do we... I think we need to talk about it more. How do we do that to reach the general public? And do you see any kind of hopeful outlook for this kind of erosion, and people's actually, their fight is still there to get Australia back?
Yeah, well, my disdain for March for Australia has been pretty public after October 19. Look, I really don't... My idea of doing this to get back to some sense of normalcy is you have to gear down. You can't go from fifth gear to first, you just blow up the engine, right? And to align with the first march with the most extreme people. And I was just like, no, this is going to stop people turning up. But they think the opposite. So we'll know on Australia Day. So I might be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. But obviously the October 19 numbers were down, particularly for the other states, maybe not so much Queensland. Queensland might have retained their numbers a bit more because they have a different idea of things. But just to go with that on the first option, I'm like, then you just create all this media storm. And I get the need to attract controversy, and I get the need that the controversy then filters people into what they might see as a solution. But I think, in fifth gear or in first gear, wherever you want to imagine that we're at, it's a numbers game, right? And it's easy for the media to make a joke of it when, one, you align with that ideology openly, and two, you have less numbers turning up. So right now, you need to... Yes, you might have that as the end goal, and maybe everybody has that as the end goal. But to get the numbers to turn up, you need to speak to them. And I just don't think the strategy was good, because you basically extinguished a whole lot of people not turning up. But yes, you might have ignited a whole lot of other people turning up. But who has the greater numbers on that side? I don't know. We'll see on Australia Day. And yeah, as I say, I hope I'm wrong. But... as for the people out there, everybody I interact with has a problem. And that is regardless of skin color, regardless of ideology, regardless of anything. Everybody is pissed off about something. You see it on the roads. Yeah. People are just... the stuff I'm seeing on the roads is just insane. People aren't paying attention. And that's because they're psychologically distracted by how am I going to make my next house payment or whatever like that. And that blocks your prefrontal functions of reacting in a situation and stuff like that. And people are driving faster and more violently. And then, that gives heed to Karen coming out and saying, toxic men destroying the world, when they're just pissed off and they can't pay for the shit. But then there's a whole class of people, particularly millennials in my area, that have all the wealth in the world because they're asset rich from their parents. Yeah. So that is a problem as well, because they're not politically engaged at all. They don't see the problem. They believe the news painting all these people turning up at marches for Australia as bad and dissenting and jobless and stupid, when they're actually the people that they're the spearhead of what is coming for that squeezing of the middle class. I'm one of the first to be left out of a job. I haven't recovered since COVID. I had a good restaurant manager job in a club then. That restaurant closed down, and then I had to move 8 times. So all my money is gone. I don't have any way up. My parents don't own housing, so I'm inheriting nothing. So if I have to move from this place, I don't know, I'll be in a tent. And those people that are in a tent now, they're the spearhead of the way Pauline Hanson got elected back in the 90s, right? She got elected to the seat of Oxley, which was an outskirt seat of Brisbane or Queensland. Where was it? Ipswich or something, I can't remember. But it's an outskirt that was one of the first places to be burdened by globalization policies, which shipped our manufacturing offshore. And that's how she got in. But the same disaffection that we're seeing today, white people being left out of jobs. But again, we have this whole class of people that just laugh at us because they're still in their jobs. And then with attracting people to the public service jobs that we see these days, non-market jobs in the public service over the last year are most increasing job market. We're not having productive jobs increasing. So that makes people attracted to voting for the government. And those jobs will be the first they'll have to adopt digital ID to keep their job. So it also benefits the government that way because they have a larger market of people to be a pilot adopter of the digital ID. So we can say, hey, it works. All you dissenting white folk that don't have public service jobs, well, ha, you suck, it's a bad future. But these marches, well, as I said, I think the strategy is out the window now for that one. Put Australia first is a joke. I've been very vocal in that over the last couple of days. I'm not sure if you saw my video yesterday on Put Australia First, but it was a very wild video. And everybody can see through that. I don't know what kind of people turned up to that, but looking at them, I'm just like, where do these people come from? What kind of closet did they crawl out of? Who even believes this Monica Smith? I mean, the whole thing was just a joke. And then you have Arby there. If Arby's there, I think, well, don't associate with that.
I did see that video got you blocked from somebody's page. I thought that was I laughed.
That was actually before. Smitty blocked me before that. Yeah, so I talked to her on that X Space that Australian Talks did on that night. But on the day of the protest, I wrote in all her in the comments underneath all her. Well, once we saw that it was a flop, I thought, okay, I'm just going to go for it. I wrote, I will not have protest relations with that woman. And now that is a play on Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, right? And that's why I call her Smitinsky. Of course, there's another association you could put towards that too, but that goes a bit deeper. But I just thought, okay, that's pretty funny. People will get it because it's a Monica reference. But that's why she blocked me, simply because of that comment. I'm like, come on. If someone comments that on my profile or something like that, I'll laugh, I'll send them back a thumbs up with a cat, go. Just some meme saying good on you, that was a good one. I'm open to that kind of insult. I don't care.
We can always
those people have the same problems of the world as me, despite their different solution. They have the same problems with Australia as me. So I don't really want to block people.
No.
Unless they go really personal.
Yes. Just to go back to what you said a little while ago about COVID and, the people around you in your neighbourhood and, same across Australia, people that have assets or young people that have family that, have properties, so on and so forth. And, you still affected by COVID. I'm in exactly the same position. COVID my family has never recovered from COVID, and what that did to our employment, our financial situation, everything. And this is actually a conversation I was having with a wonderful West Australian last night. Is that, this whole conversation, it's not even a conversation. I think they're really disrespectful throwaway comments that people make, is that, oh, COVID's over, we're moving on, not talking about it, and all these sorts of things. I think is so disrespectful, and quite frankly, anybody that says that, particularly if they are or were part of the freedom movement, I would suggest were not affected by COVID at all. And that makes me question where they were, what they were doing during COVID, if they can say those things right now. Because, it's one thing to say, look, I'm moving on with my life and I'm going to focus on something else. But there's always connotations to how people choose their words. And I think people, particularly if they're liberty lovers and participated in the freedom movement during the COVID war, you would think that they would choose their words more wisely. But that's just one of the chips I have on my shoulder. Nobody.
So I guess what you're talking about is grifters that are well funded, perhaps. The problem with those people is that it's the same with Pauline, as far as I'm concerned. They just try to capture a dissenting audience with well-trained, kind of ways of psychological capture. And, she says what you think. That's what she always says. Or people say that Pauline, for example, says what you think. Now, if grifters say what you think, then a lot of people will come along for you because they can't, they might not have the IQ of pattern recognition to understand that they're getting herded into a gate.
Yeah.
But as for forgetting about the pandemic, I looked at this in the past and when other pandemics happened, and the common theme is that they are generally forgotten about, at least in the short term, because the bulk of the population is too traumatized by it and doesn't want to admit they were wrong or whatever, and they want it to go away. Whereas we were there all along, pretty much. I think maybe in the first week of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, I switched onto it. I'm like, 2 weeks, pull the other leg. And because at that time you saw like Nancy Pelosi and stuff like that going to Chinatown to say that, we're not racist for wearing, I don't know what the message was. It was something stupid like that. And they went and hugged the Asians. Something else was going on at that time as well. Was it BLM? I don't know. There's so much stuff going on, but I just thought, okay, this is, what the hell is happening here? As for, look, in 100 or 200 years, it'll be a page on a history book. Really. But the problem is, we're alive, we're living it today, and we live it every minute. So for us, it's, real time reality, and, the end of our life might be 2050, 2060, 2070. So we're thinking, look, the trajectory for the rest of my life is down, and it might get to a South Africanization point. That's what I like to call it, a South Africanization point, because I don't really see it any other way with the lack of political solutions. Because the more people they flood in is basically like giving the ANC, importing the ANC supporters, if that makes sense to you. Because we don't have that bulk population that are native here or whatever, like they do over there. Even though a lot of their problems are actually imported from other African countries. If you look at the EFF, I can't remember what that stands for, but they're the really racist South African party. But they're from the north. They were an imported problem. But anyway, my point is that we're going to end up in a South African left out situation where we can't access work because of DEI things. And that's already happening. I can't see myself ever getting into a situation where I have a $200,000 job that's handed to me based on merit, which I could do, but where? Plus all our jobs are public service, so they get given to DEI candidates. priority over me. So my future is, after this place, I really don't know. I'll have to move rural, balance maybe being on job seeker. Because the other problem is getting a minimum wage job. The wage hasn't gone up for at least 15 years now, and the inflation is double, triple, housing tripled since 2020.
Yep.
So what do you do?
It's nuts,
I just don't know what to do.
No.
I'm distraught every day.
As part of another conversation I was having with somebody, we all know that trying to get a rental, trying to buy a house, all these sorts of things is just completely out of reach. Let's not talk about the fact that, how many people are, trying to rent the same house, all these sorts of things. There's just nowhere for people to actually exist, let alone be able to afford to exist.
If you do get a place, you can't afford it.
Yeah. So I don't know where this is all going to end up. Are we going to start seeing, we see on social media, and, I've interviewed people in Canada and so on and so forth, over in the US, all this footage of, tent cities. I know already we have, little tent cities, but all I can imagine for the very near future is just seeing streets of, tent villages in Australia. I mean, don't know.
Yeah, there'll be a tipping point for that, and I don't know when it will be. You'd think it would be very soon, but I guess people still have other people they can live with. Even a share place now in cities is $400 for a child's bedroom in some old boomer's house, that's now owned by a Chinese foreigner that rents out all the rooms. It's just like, that's actually a thing now.
Yeah.
Chinese foreign buyers are buying houses that the boomers died in or whatever, and they rent out the rooms for $400 a week. And if you do rent that room, then you're in a house with all different cultures that don't speak English. And how do you feel in that? I'd rather live in a tent.
Yeah.
At least I have some agency.
Straight out of the UK, with one of the shows that I watch as part of my guilty pleasure to unwind is if you can't pay, we'll take it away. These bailiffs that go around to evict people, and this show's like 15 years old.
Oh yeah,
type
I know
thing.
what you're talking about.
And they're going to houses there in the UK where multiple occupancy, was an everyday thing back then, and previous to that as well. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s in my job then, because I used to have a lot of dealing with international students in Australia. They were living in multiple occupancy situations, and they would tell me horror stories of the landlords, erecting walls in the middle of a bedroom so they could shove in a couple more people, all this sort of stuff. So
I've seen that here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well,
although we supposedly have more regulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I very much enjoyed having you on Relentless today. Is there a positive we can take away for the near future of Australia, or the long term?
Well, I guess it's the 2nd of December, so enjoy the next 8 days of freedom on the internet. Look, I don't know, but the positive is people are going to be drawn out to one way or another. And I would really implore the people that are in control of any movements to please get your act together strategically. I know it's hard, but don't just think that your way is the best. You need to debate and discuss your strategy and listen to other people, particularly on our side, and not just go for it, because it just gets stuffed up. Take a poll of what people think about certain issues, and don't just take it from one place where all your people that think like you live, because you're doing this to help a lot of people that are going to be disaffected in the future. More and more people are going to come to this, and it's up to you to remain professional And I think, you know, the movements will be built. Where they go, I don't know, but they will be there because there's no other way.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's a positive in a way.
Yes.
But I don't know where it will
definitely.
go from there.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, thank you very much, as I said, for joining me on Relentless. Everybody, please go along to X. That is Nobody's handle down there at Nobody's Take E with an extra E. Don't forget the extra E on X. And as you mentioned, you're also on TikTok. People can go along there to find you as well. And I do recommend you go along and follow Nobody on X. Your videos, I should say, came upon my X feed. I think you're about 200 followers at that time. And yeah, just watching your videos get spicier is a real joy, actually, of mine.
yeah, I'm getting better at the scripts and stuff like that.
Oh, that's great.
And talking as well, getting better at talking. You know, it's an odd experience talking to a camera, I guess, but you know, once you get into it, I'm getting better. So we'll see how long I last, but I really try to avoid algorithmic banning, but we'll see how we go. But yeah, please follow me. My videos are interesting. I have a very interesting take compared to many other Australian accounts. Much more orderly, I think, in the way I present the information. So yeah, please follow me and enjoy my content.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching in the audience and everybody on the replay. Thank you once again, Nobody, and I hope to talk to you soon.
No worries. Thank you. Appreciate it.